Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. Aaron Maté joins us now. Aaron, always a pleasure, my dear friend. You raised the very intriguing prospect or idea. I don't know that it's a prospect the other day in one of your X tweets. Should Israel pay reparations to Gaza? And I want to explore that with you, as unlikely as it may seem. Not the should, but will it. But before we get there, I want to talk to you about the DOD murders in the Caribbean, because there's news on it. The Department of Defense claims it has a secret memo written by the Department of Justice justifying two memos, one justifying the murders, and two claiming that the troops that are involved cannot be prosecuted under U.S. law or international law. Okay, I get it. They're justifying themselves, and they won't reveal either of those memos. It's inconceivable to me that a legal argument could be secret because the laws are public. However, MI6 has a legal memo saying that it is a violation of international law, and at least theoretically has said it will not aid the U.S. in these killings with any intel for fear that a future British administration or ICC could punish the MI6 people. What do you make of this?
Well, it just shows you how criminal the Trump administration is, that even some of the most subservient client states like the UK won't participate in these murders on the high seas. The Associated Press recently did an investigation where they actually went to the region and they interviewed the families of some of the people who've been murdered by the U.S. And one victim was a father of four who had spent years, honing his skills, navigating the waters to be able to fish for his family. And that was all he was doing. He was out there fishing. He wasn't running drugs. And of course, even if people were running drugs, that would not in any way justify these murders. But it just shows how completely reckless this administration is, claiming to go after drug traffickers, who, by the way, even if they were trafficking drugs, couldn't even reach the U.S. in these boats. But in fact, they're killing average civilians, including fishers, who are just trying to feed their families.
I don't know what can stop this other than maybe an enormous public reaction. Congress isn't going to stop it. Maybe one of the survivors or maybe one of the family members will engage U.S. counsel to bring an action and get it before a federal judge. Otherwise, Trump and Hegseth are enjoying all this killing. Hegseth boasts about it if you read his tweets. And it seems like this is going to go on without end.
I would not be surprised at all if you start seeing legal action directly from the victims' families. And you're right. I do think that would be a really effective way to stop this because, as you point out, Congress is not doing anything. To the extent there's congressional oversight, it's the Trump administration giving briefings to people already on its side while excluding everybody else. And even those who've received these briefings have to admit that there's not much there. So, yeah, I mean, look, the problem is there's so much going on in the world. We've had a government shutdown. You have ongoing Israeli attacks on Gaza and across the West Bank. You have the ongoing proxy war in Ukraine. It's hard for people to keep up with all of this, but this is just one aspect of a lawless administration with no oversight or guardrails.
The United States announced yesterday it's going to build a military base somewhere along the border between Gaza and Israel. I mean, does that mean the unthinkable U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza?
I've heard conflicting reports about this. I asked someone I know actually inside the Trump administration who denied this to me. So I don't know what the truth is. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if this happens. We already know the U.S. military is on the ground inside of Israel, coordinating plans for the so-called stabilization mission inside of Gaza. And overall, there's just been a broader U.S. expansion of its military bases. The U.S. has military bases inside of Syria already. If you recall, during Trump's first term, he ordered the withdrawal of U.S. troops from those bases, and his command just ignored him. They refused to execute the orders. So you have, whether it's under the direction of the president or not, a total commitment to U.S. military hegemony in the region. So I'd be surprised, though, if you see an actual base set up inside of Gaza. But you do have Israel already half of Gaza. So you don't even need a U.S. military base, given that Israel and the U.S. are at this point.
Is Israel out of the other half? I mean, the number that I was given this morning was Israel controls 58%. What about the 42? Is the IDF out of the 42? And is that the area that is utterly, totally inhabitable because of the 1,500 buildings they destroyed?
Correct. That's exactly right. To the extent that Israel's not in Gaza, it's in the areas that they've totally destroyed. And they're telling Palestinians, you'll have no prospects of a dignified life there, because they're not going to let Gaza rebuild in those areas that Israel doesn't control. And the areas that Israel does control, to the extent we'll even see any reconstruction there, I'd be very surprised. Unless, of course, there's money to be made off of it for Jared Kushner and his friends.
Do you know anything of the efforts by the United States to get something through the Security Council at the UN, which would establish this, it's hard to say with a straight face, so I'll do air quotes, peace board, of which President Trump is to be the chair. And theoretically, this is to be the governing body of Gaza, and its governance will be executed by none other than former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Is all this stuff before the UN?
It is, but the problem is, the U.S., just as it did during the negotiations with Hamas, keeps bowing to Israeli demands and not even putting in token gestures towards Palestinian statehood. For other people to get on board with this, they need something, even if it's totally fake, that they can point to and say, here's some sort of pathway to a Palestinian state. But Israel and the U.S. won't even grant that, because they're fundamentally opposed to anything that recognizes Palestinian rights to self-determination. So you've had the U.S. put proposals before the UN Security Council and saying, take it or leave it. This is it. We're offering nothing to Palestinians. And for other people, they just can't go along with that, because you have the Gulf states, for example, who have no interest in Palestinian rights, see them as a nuisance, but they can't formally sign off on something that so blatantly negates Palestinian rights. So they need some sort of face-saving gestures, which not even the U.S. and Israel are willing to offer. So that's why right now you're seeing the sort of peacekeeping plan stall at the UN, because the U.S. and Israel insist on pushing through something that offers nothing, not even a token recognition of a pathway to a Palestinian state.
Is the United States going to build a military base in Damascus, which was announced when al-Julani was in the White House on Monday?
That is the rumor, but again, I haven't seen that confirmed. The U.S. already has military bases in Syria. They were established to basically plunder Syria's oil and wheat during the dirty war there. Now that job has succeeded, because there was regime change in Syria after all, the reason for those bases is unclear, given that we don't need to steal Syria's oil and wheat anymore. But whether they'll build one in Damascus, that's the rumor. I just haven't seen it confirmed.
I don't know if you've seen this, and I don't even recall her name, but she is a member of the Israeli Knesset who excoriates Netanyahu while he smirks. This is worth watching, and I'm going to ask you what, if anything, will come of this. Chris, cut number 7.
I blame you, Benjamin Netanyahu. I blame you for the mindset in October. The greatest disaster this country has ever known happened on your watch. Even if you sleep with a clear conscience, we will not forget. We will cry out over the abandonment, and a state commission of inquiry will be established. I blame you, Netanyahu. Your personal corruption has become a national plague. Every corrupt person becomes your partner. The bigger the file you have on someone, the more convenient they are for you. I blame you, Netanyahu, because you have forgotten what it means to be Jewish. Trump returned hostages in your place, while you shamelessly were busy trying to get him to grant a pardon. I blame you, Netanyahu. Racism has always served you. It has torn us apart from within. You turned half the nation into an enemy. We will cleanse the poison you have poured here for 30 years. We will return to being a united society. I blame you, Netanyahu. I blame you, Netanyahu, yes.
Does this lady represent a significant portion of Israeli society?
I'm afraid not. No, she's She's left wing, she's progressive, but it's still in a Zionist context. She still believes in the idea of a Jewish state. But yes, in the Israeli spectrum, she's still at the margins because she advocates peace with Palestinians and she's critical of Netanyahu. If you look at the protest against Netanyahu, again, very little outrage against the genocide of Palestinians. It's mostly focused on his own corruption, his attempts to overhaul the judiciary. For example, look, right now in Israel, you have protests surrounding the issue of this controversy of leaked videotape of the rape of torture of a Palestinian. The protests are not against the rapist; they're actually in support of the rapist. And meanwhile, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights just released really harrowing testimony from Palestinian prisoners who have recently been freed about the rape and sexual torture that they've endured. It's just it's so ghastly what these people are reporting, what happened to them. No controversy at all within Israel. Everyone just yawned. And of course, it doesn't even get reported inside the U.S. because instead, when it comes to the issue of rape, the focus has been on these concocted claims of Hamas sexual violence on October 7th. Actual people, actual Palestinians providing firsthand testimony of rape and sexual torture. It's greeted with a collective yawn because it doesn't serve the narrative that we need to wage a genocide against Palestinians. So unfortunately, that Israeli lawmaker who's critical of Netanyahu, who supports peace with Palestinians, is a small fringe inside of Israel.
Chris, do we still have the B-roll showing the adulation of these masked defendants as they walk into a courtroom? He'll have it for you in a minute. Excuse me. These are the same thugs. Do we have it? There we go.
So there it is. So that's one of their court hearings, and they're being cheered by their supporters.
Right. They're being cheered by the public in some sort of an anteroom outside the actual courtroom.
Yep, exactly right. And that's far more reflective of Israeli society than those who oppose rape and torture of Palestinians. And by the way, the group that released that testimony I just talked about, this testimony of Palestinians being raped and sexually tortured, it's a group called the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. They're one of 3 Palestinian human rights groups who've been sanctioned by the Trump administration. Their YouTube page was recently taken down by YouTube because they're now under YouTube sanctions. So the Palestinian groups documenting rape and sexual torture by Israelis, they're so marginalized that not only is U.S. media ignoring the testimony that they released, but literally there's state-backed censorship of them to the point where their YouTube page, which contains important footage, important testimony, had just been taken down by YouTube.
Are they allowed? I don't know if you know this, but are they allowed to go into court wearing masks? I mean, the court has the right to know who the hell they are. These are people who took videos of themselves raping someone with such ferocity that he required 20 surgical procedures thereafter. And now they're hiding their faces.
I'm not sure what the protocol is, but there was one video of one of the suspects recently at a news conference who took off his mask and was proud to show Israel who he is, because they're proud of raping and sexually torturing Palestinians, and they have impunity to do so by their government. Again, there's this whole controversy recently over the military prosecutor who was driven to a suicide attempt because of the attacks that she faced simply for making this evidence public. So the people in Israel who are under scrutiny when it comes to these allegations are those who expose the sexual torture and the rape. Those who actually committed it, they're openly celebrated as heroes.
It appears that something's happening with the Epstein files now that this new congresswoman from, I forget if it's New Mexico or Arizona, will be sworn in. And apparently one of the Republicans has changed her mind and is now voting or will vote in favor of this release. Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado is now joining her friend Marjorie Taylor Greene. And CNN is reporting that there will be a meeting this afternoon inside the White House as aides try to manage a potential House vote on the release of the Epstein files. I'm just wondering if there's any more information involving Epstein and Mossad or IDF generals or Israeli officials who should be shaking in their boots.
Well, one of them is Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister who was close with Jeffrey Epstein. It's also recently come out that that an Israeli intelligence officer was actually staying at Jeffrey Epstein's house when he visited New York. So
An
clearly,
Israeli and wait, an actual member of the Mossad?
I don't know. I don't recall which agency he was with. It was either Mossad or Shin Bet, but some Israeli intelligence officer was staying at Jeffrey Epstein's home in New York City. That recently came out. It's at Drop Site News. And so clearly there are ties between Jeffrey Epstein and Israel, and clearly there are ties between Trump and Epstein, which presumably explains why Trump has been so against the release of these files and the extent to and the lengths that Mike Johnson has gone to prevent their release. Again, whether this meets the maximalist theories about a blackmail ring on behalf of Israel run by Jeffrey Epstein, I've always been skeptical of that part. But clearly, there is a tie here between Jeffrey Epstein and Trump. Clearly, a tie between Jeffrey Epstein and Israel. And if these files do get released, hopefully, we'll learn a whole lot more.
Wow. Is there serious talk about Israeli reparations for the demolition of more than half of Gaza? 1,500 buildings reduced to rubble.
No. And it will never happen unless Israel is compelled to by its chief sponsor in the U.S. So that, really the question comes down to, will we see our government reflect public opinion in the U.S., public opinion which is so now overwhelmingly against Israel? But without the U.S. changing its policy, no, there will be no compensation or reparations by Israel to Palestinians. And that's always been the case. Again, Israel's founded on stolen Palestinian land. You have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians around the world who have the original keys to their stolen homes that were taken from them in 1948. Israel, in all the multiple rounds of so-called peace talks, has never been willing to take any responsibility. The farthest that they've been willing to go is to acknowledge Palestinian suffering, but not to acknowledge that Israel stole Palestinian homes and Palestinian land. And so that same attitude is there today when it comes to the destruction of Gaza. Israel feels completely entitled to destroy Gaza because on October 7th, the natives dared to raise their heads and resist this long-running brutal military occupation that Israel thinks it's completely entitled to maintain.
Does Trump's letter to Israeli President Herzog mean a damn thing in terms of, by the way, look at the way he signs it, Aaron. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. And I was on White House stationery. He's the only Donald Trump that lives in the White House. And he still has to identify himself in caps as President of the United States of America. I've never seen that. I've received letters from presidents. There isn't even anything printed under their name. It's just their signature. You know damn well who the signer is.
Well, and what he's asking Herzog, therefore, is a pardon of Netanyahu, just as he did in his speech before the Knesset last month when he went before the Knesset and just told the Israeli lawmakers to give Netanyahu a pardon. In between also talking about how he does the bidding of Miriam Edelson, bragging about how it was the Edelsons who got him to recognize Israel's theft of the Golan Heights and move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. So Trump, in this letter to the Israeli president asking for a pardon of Netanyahu, is just continuing his advocacy for the Edelsons. It's Miriam Edelson who wants this pardon for Netanyahu because they're very close. And Trump, as he openly bragged about before the Israeli parliament, does the Edelsons bidding. So that's just what he's doing here. And it also gives, it newly exposes, to whatever extent we got leaks from the White House and Israelis saying there was some kind of rift between Trump and Netanyahu. That was all just a complete farce to give cover for the reality, which is Trump's unfettered support for Israeli genocide.
Here's Yair Lapid, the leader of the opposition, chastising Trump. Now, this guy is no saint in terms of his arch-Zionist views, but he is basically saying to the President of the United States, stay the hell out of our internal affairs. Chris, cut number 14.
But there comes a moment when people who call themselves the national camp also need to say to the American president, listen, we are a sovereign country. There is a limit to interference. It is precisely the nationalists who should say, listen, you can't send letters and demand a pardon for the Israeli prime minister in a criminal proceeding. We are a proud country. We are a sovereign nation. We are not a protectorate of anyone. It can't be that the Prime Minister keeps running to you for help and you issue letters calling to grant him a pardon. A country that is proud of itself, with national dignity, with a large national camp that crosses both coalition and opposition, does not behave this way. And there are plenty of people here who spend all day telling us what kind of national pride we should have. First and foremost, the Prime Minister, and secondly, the Justice Ministers should have approached the American President and told him, sir, we ask you, stop interfering in this matter because we have our pride. We are not an American protectorate, we are an independent country, and it pains me that the national camp is not behaving like a national camp. Thank you very much.
A national camp, Likud?
Yeah, he's referring to Netanyahu's coalition, the ultra-nationalists, the ultra-extremists who dominate Netanyahu's cabinet.
Can Herzog, like that, stop these prosecutions?
I believe he can issue a pardon. But when it comes to Yair Lapid's comments about we're not an American protectorate, I'm sorry, you are. And yes. the genocide that Yair Lapid just supported, fully supported, would not have happened without U.S. support. So yes, he doesn't want the U.S. interfering directly, so brazenly in Israeli politics that Trump is begging for a pardon for Netanyahu. But when it comes to everything else, yes, Israel is a U.S. protectorate, and Yair Lapid, if he were ever the prime minister of Israel and he were ever indicted for war crimes, he'd be relying on the U.S. just as much as Netanyahu is right now to protect him.
Aaron, thank you, my dear friend. Always a pleasure. Much appreciated. Thanks for accommodating my schedule. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Judge.
Sure. Long day, but still to come. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, Scott Ritter, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.